Welcome to the Risk and Repeat podcast, episode number 244. I'm Rob Wright, Security News Director at Search Security, and I am here with Senior Security News Writer Alex Kalafi and Security News Writer Ariel Waldman. Hello, guys.
Hi.
Hi, Rob.
How are you doing on this fine? We're recording this on Friday, December 20th, the Friday before Christmas holiday week. How are you guys doing on this fine Friday?
Good. I had a moment the other day when I was talking to my wife and realized that we were planning to go apple picking this season, and it's already late December.
Yeah, you're screwed. It's not happening. How about you, Ariel?
I'm pretty good. Not really enjoying the snow today, but I guess it feels more Christmassy now.
Yeah. The snow it's coming. Anyway, we are here to, I guess, discuss a different kind of storm. Look at that transition. Look at me. Uh, we're here to discuss ransomware. Ransomware in 2024. Now that we are coming to the end of the year, wanted to discuss with you guys some of the things that we've seen with this threat activity, this threat over the last 12 months. There's been a lot of stuff going on with ransomware and sort of ransomware-related stuff. And I thought it'd be worth sitting down to have a conversation about this to kind of try to put it into some context, because I think that could be valuable. Looking back at 2024, how would you guys describe the year in terms of ransomware? Ariel, let's start with you.
How would I describe ransomware really it rocked every sector, so many victim organizations. It was a huge threat in 2023, and organizations got no reprieve this year. Also, it just kept getting worse and worse throughout the year, it seems. Big attacks, big data breaches, big ransom demands, a lot of ransom payments, people giving into the ransom demands, a lot of backlash and how to combat the threat. Yeah, it's just not great overall.
Kind of a potentially worsening situation, maybe.
Yes, it seems. Yeah, I don't know, vendors or organizations, vendors and researchers. It sounds like it's not going to get better into 2025, but I guess we're focusing on 2024 for now.
Yeah. Alex, what about you?
Two thoughts. The first is that ransomware feels folded into the pastiche of life pretty comfortably now, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it's just an accepted part of life. I guess there are little innovations happening every year, whether it's the changing definition of extortion or extortionware, ransomware, whatever, or maybe the triple extortion or whatever you want to say. But for the most part, it's become less, oh my God, what's happening to ransomware? And well, it's another year of ransomware. That's the first thought. Is that it's gotten like very, like, I don't know, it's become a comfortable part of life or an uncomfortable part of life,
Right.
whatever. The second thing is the threat actors seem worse and more desperate than ever before. More, I since we're reporters, I try not to make moral judgments in our sort of writing. Um, but the people who do ransomware attacks seem particularly morally reprehensible, whether it's the attacks on hospitals,
Yep.
whether it's, mental health organizations having patient data uh, time after time used to extort patients or the organization itself, um, whether it's the payments going up, um, it just the cybercrime seems ugly and the people conducting it seem spiritually ugly too, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Well, you had made a note in a recent story about how it was just a couple of years ago, I believe it was your story, that during the COVID pandemic, the early days, there were several ransomware gangs, pretty well-known gangs that said, you know what? Uh, Life is tough enough right now. We're not going to hit healthcare organizations or hospitals. Like that's,
Mhm.
we're like, look at us. We're not monsters. We're just business people. This is just business. We seem to be a long way away from that. A long way.
And it
To your
wasn't even true. They didn't even like not do that, but at least they kind of said it and
Yeah,
like maybe there was an intention from some people somewhere,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that pretense has completely disappeared, I feel
yeah.
like.
I know there were some groups that said, "Hey, we can't control our affiliates, what they do with our ransomware." And I thought, well, okay. Anyway, yeah, and there were some notable attacks this year. I mean, just looking back at some of the ransomware roundups that we did, uh, monthly roundups about the activity, it seems like, from my perspective, editing them, lots of municipal governments, counties, cities, etc., even some state departments, and a lot of schools and education sector targets. But there were some big names out there too. Uh, some really big names. In fact, just recently, Krispy Kreme. I mean, these guys, they'll go after anybody. Uh, but yeah, so like we looked at a number of large attacks this year, and some of the biggest ones you wrote about, Ariel. Which one stood out to you, I guess?
It definitely changed healthcare. I
Yeah.
think that was one of the biggest ones just because of how long the disruptions occurred and how many downstream customers were affected patient care. We found out that they actually paid the ransom. And even though they paid the $22 million ransom, they still were disrupted for like a long time. It didn't really seem to have a huge effect when they paid the ransom. And the CEO had to testify in
Hmm.
front of the House and Energy Committee. And we found out that they were breached through a Citrix portal that didn't have MFA enabled, which was kind of disheartening to hear that they didn't have MFA enabled, and that's how attackers got in because that's a pretty standard security protocol. Um, so yeah, the more we learned about that attack, it just seemed to get worse and worse as it went on. And of course, it's a healthcare organization, which is always really bad when they
Yeah.
get ransom. Yeah.
I think that one is going to have significant, or already has significant, repercussions for the world, really, just because, your point about the downstream customers, that platform, it's not a supply chain attack, but it disrupted a significant amount of organizations. I mean, disrupted Change Healthcare's customers. It disrupted their customers. It disrupted their patients. Like the waterfall of disruption just seemed to go on and on and on and really affect people. So the blast radius for an attack like that was particularly huge. And that's
Yeah.
something that, like, it seems like a lot of cybersecurity professionals, uh, government officials, people all over the place are just sort of really concerned about that type of attack that has that downstream effect. People in cyber insurance, people in, like I said, government, people in the legal profession for sure. It was a huge impact. Alex, any attacks stick out for you looking back at the year?
No, I mean I'm just going to talk about Change Healthcare more,
Yeah, go.
because it's very rare, and this may be the only time it's happened where not just me, but Ariel, we both separately got letters in the mail for
Mhm.
Change Healthcare. And Rob, I bet someone in your family did too. It was estimated by the CEO to have impacted 1/3 of Americans. Like we
Right.
got letters for this breach in the mail. Disrupted healthcare, and at least as far as scheduling, payment,
Right.
filling prescriptions, um and then you have like little stories alongside this, like how some of the downstreamish victims were getting acquired by Change Healthcare in the wake of the attack, which is a piece that is under discussed, but in a crazy year where
Mhm.
like the insane news happens week after week. Um, it just that just falls through the cracks a little bit.
Right.
And then its parent company had a crazy year too.
For sure.
And it's
Yeah.
just I don't know. It's just it's not would I call it the story of the year from a security standpoint? No, I think maybe the CrowdStrike IT outage is perhaps a little bit bigger,
Mm.
but it's one of the if you ask me to name 10 stories in the 5 years Ariel and I have been like on this beat that like are the big ones, this ranks as like
Yeah.
one of among the 10, at least to me.
Yeah. Up there with like solar winds and yeah.
Do you feel
Definitely.
similar? Do you feel similar, Rob?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was one of those things where when it first happened, you're like, another healthcare breach, another healthcare ransomware attack. Oh, this is just a kind of a software platform. What's the big deal? But it's one of those slow rolling disasters that as it unfolded week after week, to your point, Alex, it just seemed to get worse and worse. And I know we covered it extensively here. Ariel mentioned the ransom payment and just the difficulty they had in restoring systems and operations after the payment was even made, and just the financial hardships that you heard about with customers and then downstream customer. It just, yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And again, it really emphasized the effect that a single attack on a provider with a pretty broad reach, what that can do. I mean, there were other attacks like this. There was the car, was a
Yeah.
car.
CDK Global.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
right, no, like this isn't to minimize that attack or disparage CDK Global in any way, but like, does anyone besides us remember that attack? You
Not
know,
sure. Yeah.
right? Like
Mm-mm.
and it was bad for them. It was bad,
Yeah.
but we're not hearing about car dealerships like going into receivership or going bankrupt. Like that's not what happened with that. Uh, so yeah, Change Healthcare is probably at the top of the list, not just for ransomware attacks this year, but also for, stories, cybersecurity stories of the year. I want to go back to the earlier part of the year and talk about the law enforcement actions.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were some big ones. There was some late 2023. There was LockBit in February. That was the phase one of Operation Kronos against LockBit. There were several phases. It's like an MCU movie. Phase one, phase two, phase three. Uh, that's no disrespect to the law enforcement agencies and the operations because they definitely had an effect. But I want to ask you guys, how much of an effect, a positive effect, do you think those law enforcement actions have?
Good. Well, I would say, unlike the MCU, cyber law enforcement is having a really good 2024. Actually,
Yeah,
no. I actually in Deadpool Wolverine's defense, that one was good, but boy oh boy has it been rough out there
it's been a
lately.
little rough.
Anyway, um Lockbit was kind of crazy. And we still talk about the Lockbit disruption all the time.
Hmm.
Operation Kronos, led by the UK's National Cybersecurity Center, not just seized a bunch of servers and made some arrests and got some decryption keys. I think over 1,000. Was it more later on the decryption key front, or was it just the 1,000 up
I
front?
think it
I
was just
forget.
1,000 up front.
All
Yeah,
right,
in the
still a ton.
initial in phase one, right?
Yep. Still a ton. But the thing they did was they rebranded LockBit's official .onion site
Hmm.
with their own stylized version, which had press releases. It had leaked data that the law enforcement themselves leaked. Later on, it had the identity of LockBit Sup, who runs that group. And at first, we saw this and we're like, "Oh, that's really creative. That's an interesting sort of PR angle." But what became clear over time was whether this was intentional on the Operation Chronos team side or not, it had a really big impact, at least according to security researchers and the like, on Lockbit's reputation. And even though Lockbit is still active to some degree now with its, I think they're on their 4.0 or something.
Yeah, they've rebranded again.
Yep, they've rebranded again. Um, they're not the giant they were a year and a half ago by any
Yep.
means. They don't have remotely the same support by any means. And even though they rank among the major groups, it's clear that this sort of name and shame strategy is a really cool, potentially effective new tool in the toolkit for law enforcement agencies trying to take down cyber criminal groups.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to have been effective. The trolling may have seemed a little silly at first, but it's hard to argue with the results, even though we would see LockBit 3.0 ransomware infections kind of pop up throughout the year and a lot of the monthly reports from companies like NCC Group and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It's continued to decline and it's nowhere near, say, like the new most prolific group like our ransom hub. Um, Ariel, do you have any thoughts on the law enforcement actions, LockBit specific or otherwise?
I mean, Lockbit did seem to kind of curb their activity a lot. I just covered an ESET report that said Ransom Hub was the most active ransomware group in the second half of this year. So
Hmm.
they kind of replaced Lockbit as far as the most active group. And then I was thinking about the Black Cat LB takedown as well. That kind of happened toward the end of last year.
Yep.
It seemed like they were disrupted, but then they were responsible for like huge attacks this year,
Yeah.
including Change Healthcare.
Right.
So I mean, it definitely disrupted them, but it didn't seem to, stop them from doing anything. Now it seems like Black Cat is kind of down, but I don't know if that's due to law enforcement or kind of their own internal
Yeah.
arguments there that ensued like after Change Healthcare attack. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting that people kind of thought they were disrupted at the end of last year, but then they had really notable attacks this year. But I agree
Yeah.
with Alex as far as Lockbit and exposing the Lockbit sup. That seemed to have been a new tactic, like Alex said, that is working. They really need to expose the leaders, and that kind of scares off other people from wanting to work with him. So yeah, his reputation seemed to have gone downhill after that.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting, I guess, way of looking at it because the popular knowledge, I guess, surrounding these criminal groups is that yes, there are criminal organizations you can disrupt, but these are also a collection of people either in Russia or, you know, elsewhere, Belarus maybe,
Yep.
Romania, Ukraine, whatever, all these places. And if you take down a group and you don't arrest the people or expose them to the world, they'll just reform as another gang. And actually, what'll really happen is the individuals will just focus their attention on the seven other groups they're already doing affiliate work with
Yeah.
or whatever. But when you expose the names, when you make the arrests, when you make the sanctions, so these rich people can't take their families on vacation to the U.S. or send their kids to college at NYU. You're harming their reputation and you're harming these criminals' lives in a way that matters.
Mm,
Because reputation is the currency that does actually affect them.
yeah,
And that's, you know, I'm not saying like I take like any joy in that happening necessarily. There's a lot of complicated factors
sure.
to all
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but if you're trying to curb cybercrime, it's a really interesting, creative way of approaching it, like
yeah,
ideologically.
yeah.
The photo of LockBit Sup will definitely stand out. Like
So
season
good.
4.
So good. Yeah, that picture was mm. I almost thought it was fake. It was like this is too perfect.
Yeah.
Um, as we wrap up here, I want to talk about a trend that I thought was pretty noticeable this year. The shift from ransomware gangs or ransomware actors, kind of moving away from deploying the actual ransomware and just getting into some of these organizations and stealing data and ransoming the data. Just saying, hey, we're going to extort you because we have this sensitive data, and if we release it, it's going to be really bad for you. Uh, what do you guys think of that trend? I think it's fascinating, and if you had told me this is the direction that ransomware was going to go, I'd think it was, I guess, all things considered, it would be a positive. But everyone I talk to in the cybersecurity field doesn't think so. So I don't know. What do you guys think
Say that again. What's the trend?
of the ransomware gangs just sort of stealing data rather than deploying ransomware?
Well, as someone who's not technologically as knowledgeable as these researchers, I guess I don't know. But if I was to try to think about it from their possible perspective of why this might not be good, maybe I would say even if encryption is worse in a lot of ways, the resource overhead of stealing information alone is probably much, much lower than having to get inside a system, gain persistence, hang out a while, encrypt it, conduct a ransomware attack. You can
Yeah.
probably do a lot more if your goal is just to steal data. Which, what was that? Who was that group like a year ago who did all of the like they did a million different attacks at once from one vulnerability and got like 70 million from it?
Oh, you mean Klopp?
Clop. Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one I was thinking of. Clop is it's not as effective as encryption, but you can hit way more victims in way less time.
Yeah. Yeah. Ariel, you have thoughts?
Well, I do kind of think that organizations are more maybe motivated to pay by the extortion demands. I know I'm sure they want to get their systems up and running, and business operation disruptions can be really brutal and financially, hurt them. But it seems like the threat of extortion is enough, which is kind of sad. I mean, they don't want their data to be leaked, so maybe that's like enough for them to pay. Um, I don't know if I would think like you that it'd be worse if they were encrypted and
Yeah.
extortioned, but
Right. If it was a
what are the
double,
risks? Yeah.
yeah, if it was a double extortion attack, you could understand why an organization says like a colonial pipeline, like, hey, we got to get our systems back up. There's a potential gas shortage happening on the East Coast.
Yeah.
I don't like it, but I kind of understand it. I don't know. In some of these cases, though, it you have companies that aren't being encrypted that are paying pretty sizable ransoms just to prevent data from being leaked. And it's kind of shocking to me.
I actually thought that this year we were going to see less encryption, like less and less encryption than we've even seen because it seemed so successful, just the extortion part last year when the trend kind of started.
Yeah. I mean, talking with some folks recently, it seems like it has increased, but to what degree? Not
Yeah.
really sure. It's hard to tell. I mean, the disclosures about these attacks are very bare bones and it can be difficult to determine what actually happened. I do think going forward, and this is a conversation probably for another pod, I think there probably needs to be a real honest discussion about what ransomware is and what it is not, and what is, I guess, permissible for paying a ransom. If you're a hospital and you get your systems encrypted and you've got life-saving services that need to be restored, emergency services that need to be restored. Look, I get it. If you're a company and you get hit with hit by a ransomware gang that just steals data, and you're paying because I don't know, you just don't want the data to get out. You're worried about shareholders. You're worried about stock price. Whatever the calculus is. I don't know. I think that's a different conversation. I think that's fundamentally different than having your business operations halted completely. And I wonder if next year, if that's going to be more of a discussion amongst cybersecurity companies, threat analysts, experts. I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But the fact that these guys are avoiding deploying ransomware, like, yay, that's good for us. XDR, EDR, it's working. We're making it a little bit harder on these guys. But in the end, I guess it doesn't really matter, because if they can still do what they do and command millions of dollars in extortion fees, then we're not in a great situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry to end the pod on a downer note.
What other note are you going to end it on?
Yeah,
I
that's
know.
Not...
Guys, true
We are
story.
talking about ransomware here.
Yeah, true story. I am going to be more positive in 2025. I swear.
That's as the kids say, Rob.
Yeah.
Hap.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Alex, Ariel, for discussing ransomware in 2024 with me. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you to the readers and listeners of Informa Tech Target and Search Security and the Risk and Repeat podcast. I'm Rob Wright, and we will see you next time.